Ozzy Osbourne didn't go out with a whimper. He went out like a legend. The world didn't just lose a rock star, it lost a force of nature. Nestled deep in the English countryside, behind wrought iron gates and surrounded by a sea of mourners, his funeral became more than just a ceremony. It was a spectacle, a final encore. Sharon Osbourne, frail but composed, led the charge alongside their children, Kelly and Jack. Cameras kept their distance, but inside those gates, something surreal unfolded. Grief turned into reverence. There was no stage, no spotlight, yet it felt like the world had paused for one last standing ovation. Clutching a single purple rose, symbolic of Ozzy's signature tinted glasses, Sharon stood at the front of the procession with a grace that masked unimaginable pain. Kelly and Jack flanked her, both visibly shaken, Jack holding an urn believed to contain part of his father's legacy. In that moment, the Osbournes weren't just a rock dynasty, they were a grieving family, stripped of titles, humbled by loss. The silence was deafening, broken only by soft footsteps and the occasional sob. This wasn't a media moment. This was raw, human grief wrapped in black velvet and burning incense. Then came the blacked-out SUVs, one after another, unloading a guest list that looked like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had risen from the grave. Elton John appeared in a velvet suit with a blood-red lapel pin. Paul McCartney arrived discreetly. Axl Rose stepped out in the same weathered leather jacket from his final European tour. Slash was there, wild hair, guitar slung over his back like a silent offering. Lady Gaga, draped in a cathedral-length veil, walked arm in arm with Dave Grohl. Even Johnny Depp, Rami Malek, Jared Leto, Robert Downey Jr. and Marilyn Manson made quiet entrances. No red carpets, no flashing bulbs, just silence, black clothes, and tears behind sunglasses. When the casket, mahogany and draped in black silk embroidered with a silver bat, was carried down the crimson velvet aisle, even the toughest rock gods crumbled. No pyro, no stage tricks, just raw, stripped emotion. Then, James Hetfield stepped forward, guitar low, joined by Dave Grohl, Zakk Wylde, and Eric Clapton. Together, they delivered an acoustic version of No More Tears that left the entire room shattered. Eyewitnesses said you could feel it in your bones, every chord, every word. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a farewell, from one king to another. When Sir Anthony Hopkins stepped to the lectern, no one expected what came next. His voice, soft but commanding, echoed through the chapel. We don't mourn a man today. We honor a storm, a force of nature who thundered through our lives and left us breathless. The crowd, packed with legends too proud to applaud anything, rose in a standing ovation. It was a moment that defied ego. For one flickering second, the industry bowed, not to a chart topper, not to a celebrity, but to chaos, rebellion, and raw authenticity personified in Ozzy Osbourne. After the service, guests were led into a garden pavilion where Ozzy's legacy was displayed in full force. There were guitars he smashed on stage, handwritten lyrics, his first stitched and burned stage jacket, and even his infamous bat-shaped mic suspended in crystal. The centerpiece, a lone recliner from his dressing room, untouched, with a note that read, "He never missed a rehearsal, even when no one else showed up." It wasn't just a memorial. It was a living museum of a man who gave the world everything, even when it nearly killed him. And then came the fire. As twilight descended upon the Osbourne estate, the soft glow of 1,000 candles began to replace the fading sunlight. The mourners, still recovering from the emotional weight of the chapel service, were gently ushered into the garden for one final act. A sacred ceremony, planned in silence but destined to echo forever. At the center of the garden stood a towering iron sculpture, black as night, forged in the unmistakable shape of a winged bat, Ozzy's eternal emblem. Its wings stretched outward, as if ready to carry his spirit skyward. Beneath it, engraved in solid stone, was the legendary Black Sabbath logo, glowing faintly under hidden-up lighting. This wasn't just a tribute. This was a monument, a permanent altar to the man who redefined music, madness, and meaning. The Osbourne family emerged from the shadows once more. Each guest was handed a black beeswax candle, the kind that burns slowly and smells faintly of earth and ash. Sharon, Kelly, Jack, and Amy led the procession, walking with a kind of weight that only those who have lost someone truly irreplaceable can understand. Their steps were slow, measured, reverent. Behind them, a silent crowd followed. Elton John, Lady Gaga, Dave Grohl, Slash, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. It was like a constellation of grief trailing behind a single, flickering light. One by one, mourners approached the base of the sculpture. They placed their candles gently in the soil beneath the wings, each one becoming a point of light in a growing sea of fire. Some kneeled, some prayed, some touched the cold iron as if seeking one last connection to the man it honored. It wasn't a funeral anymore. It was a ritual, a spiritual unburdening. Then, at the heart of it all, came Sharon. Clutching her candle, she stepped forward and held the wick to the eternal flame that had been hidden within the bat's chest. Her hands shook as the flame caught. The iron sculpture came alive, glowing from within as the fire spread across hidden channels forged into the wings. Light poured out like breath. A warm wind rolled through the garden, and just then, from the shadows, came a soft hum. The choir, returning one last time, singing a ghost-like rendition of Changes. No stage, no applause, just raw, quiet reverence. It didn't need microphones, it didn't need social media clips or hashtags or analysis. It just was. A moment suspended outside of time, a moment that said everything without speaking a word. While the fire burned in that garden of iron, a very different fire was catching far beyond the Osbourne gates. By midnight, the world had changed. Across major cities, landmarks dimmed their lights, not in mourning, but in tribute. From Los Angeles to Tokyo, the tallest buildings in the world glowed in Ozzy's signature color, crimson. Not a sterile white, not a mournful blue. Crimson. A blood-red blaze that screamed louder than any tribute song. It wasn't just symbolic, it was cinematic. In Times Square, the bright screens slowed to a crawl. Ads faded into black, and in their place, a single message looped silently across the heart of Manhattan. You will always be the Prince of Darkness. In Tokyo, at the busy Shinjuku train station, a young street performer paused mid-set. He took a deep breath, then quietly strummed the opening chords to Crazy Train. People stopped, heads bowed. Lighters flicked to life. Candles were pulled from backpacks. Strangers became mourners, but nowhere felt the tremor more than Birmingham, the place where it all began. By dawn, the streets were packed, not with riot police or chaos, but with fans. Thousands of them, old, young, tattooed, clean-cut. Some came in full Sabbath regalia, leather, spikes, eyeliner running down their cheeks. Others wore suits. Many had flown in from abroad. They stood in respectful silence, gathered at a makeshift memorial erected in the city center. A stage covered in roses, photos, and candles. A towering screen played clips of Ozzy through the decades, grinning with Sharon, cradling his grandkids, screaming into microphones in packed stadiums. The city's mayor stepped forward, voice cracking as he spoke. He never left Birmingham. He carried us on every tour, in every chorus, with every scream. This city wasn't just where he was from. It was who he was. In London, jukeboxes and pubs were overridden by Ozzy's discography on loop. No one changed the track. In Berlin, churches opened their doors for public vigils, not religious ceremonies, but simply a place to sit, cry, and let the music wash over you. At Hollywood's Sunset Strip, Fans lined up outside every venue Ozzy ever played. The Whiskey A Go-Go turned off its lights, handed out candles, and hosted an unplugged set where young artists and aging legends traded verses like sacred text. And online, the world grieved in pixels. Memes stopped being memes. They became sacred visuals. A thunderstorm over a stadium read, "He's doing sound check." A heavenly photoshopped Ozzy stood at the gates of heaven, mic in one hand, dove on the other, offering one last wink at the media that never stopped following him. Rockers around the world posted black squares with captions like, "The loudest silence I've ever heard." / "There would be no us without him." James Hetfield. "We didn't lose a man, we lost a map." Dave Grohl. It was no longer about Ozzy, the celebrity. It was about Ozzy, the feeling, the storm inside your chest that finally had a name. Ozzy's reach didn't end with guitars and stage dives. He was a culture-shifting, myth-making anomaly, and now the entire world was responding. In Brooklyn, a rabbi opened Shabbat services with a story about redemption and resilience, using Ozzy as the metaphor. "We are not our worst days," he said. "We are what we choose to become after them." In Ireland, a priest ended his Sunday sermon with a recording of "Dreamer." The parishioners didn't clap. They just stood and listened. Many wiped their eyes. And in Bangkok, a Buddhist monk who integrates music into meditation played slow, instrumental Sabbath songs during a group session, describing Ozzy as a soul who roared through the storms of life without ever surrendering his heart. In the world of fashion, tributes poured in from the unlikeliest of places. Balenciaga released sketches of custom boots Ozzy never got to wear, originally designed for what would have been his next tour. A French fashion house posted a capsule collection of black leather jackets, the proceeds of which were promised to mental health charities, a nod to Ozzy's decades of public honesty about his own battles. Designers called him the father of glam metal fashion, praising the man who wore eyeliner and crucifixes long before it was cool. Even radio stations across 3 continents broke their programming rules. Every genre paused. Hip-hop, pop, jazz, country all wiped their scheduled rotations and gave 12 uninterrupted hours to Ozzy Osbourne. No ads, no DJ chatter, just music. From War Pigs to See You on the Other Side, his voice became a global anthem for grief. Then came a rare message from Sharon, released through her spokesperson. "He gave you everything? Please, keep him alive by playing it loud." And just like that, the silence was shattered once more. Back inside the estate, hours after the last guest had left, the fire beneath the bat-winged sculpture still burned. The candles around its base had melted into wax puddles. The wind had died down, and the stars blinked above like tiny, flickering stage lights. It was then, long after the tributes, long after the headlines, that Sharon returned to the memorial alone. She carried no phone, no flowers, just a single, pitch-black rose. She knelt at the base of the sculpture and placed the rose on the cold stone. The iron bat towered over her like a guardian. She looked up at the flame, soft, steady, eternal, and whispered something no one else could hear. No security followed, no reporters hovered. The moment belonged only to her and the fire. Outside the estate, fans still lingered. Some slept in blankets, others sang softly. Many just sat, staring at the darkened windows, as if waiting for Ozzy to appear once more. As if he'd throw open the doors and scream, "Let the madness begin!" One last time. But he didn't need to, because he was already everywhere, in the chords of tribute bands across Europe, in the silent cries of fans lighting candles in Brazil, in the eyes of a teenager discovering Sabbath for the first time, in the boots of every performer who ever dared to be different, in the laughter of old tour mates retelling backstage stories, and in the flame that never went out, not in the garden, and not in the hearts of those who loved him. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just leave the stage. He became it. He was the sound. He was the scream. He was the sacred chaos that reminded the world what it means to feel something. And now, in his absence, that roar doesn't fade. It echoes forever.